Hi, I'm Dr. John, and for more than 30 years, I've had a front row seat to something most people don't fully understand until it's already happening to them. What truly happens to the human body after the age of 75. I've reviewed thousands of patient histories. I've sat across from families trying to understand sudden changes, and I can tell you this with complete honesty. What I'm about to share is not widely explained early enough, not because doctors are hiding it, but because by the time most people notice the signs, these changes have already been developing silently, sometimes for years. So today, I'm going to walk you through something important. 5 biological shifts that affect every person who crosses into their mid to late 70s. It doesn't matter how disciplined you were, it doesn't matter how active you stayed, it doesn't matter how healthy your lifestyle has been. These changes are not optional. But here's the part most people miss. The people who handle them best are not the strongest. They are the ones who saw them coming. Let's begin with something that confuses and frustrates nearly everyone I see in this age group: sleep. I cannot tell you how many patients walk into my office convinced something is wrong with their brain and they say, I wake up all night. I fall asleep too early. I'm up at 3 a.m. for no reason. And almost every time I have to explain the same thing. This is not insomnia. This is not anxiety. And in most cases, it's not even a disorder. It's a complete restructuring of how your brain handles sleep. After 75, the brain undergoes a shift that changes sleep at its core. Deep sleep, the phase responsible for repair, memory consolidation, immune support, can drop dramatically. And when that happens, you don't just feel tired. You feel it everywhere, in your joints, in your mood, in your memory, in your energy. At the same time, the body produces less of the hormone that signals sleep readiness. Your internal clock begins shifting forward. That's why many people suddenly feel ready for bed earlier than ever before, and wide awake long before sunrise. This isn't weakness, it's biology adapting. The problem is, most people fight it. They try to force their old routine onto a body that's now operating on a different schedule, and that resistance creates unnecessary stress. What actually helps is something much simpler. Work with your body, not against it. If you feel tired earlier, sleep earlier. If you wake in the night, don't panic. A short period of quiet wakefulness between sleep cycles is not abnormal at this stage of life. In fact, for many people, adopting a split sleep rhythm leads to better overall rest. Morning light becomes extremely important. Natural sunlight helps reset your internal clock more effectively than anything else. And in the evening, reducing artificial light, even something as simple as limiting screen exposure, can make a noticeable difference. But while your sleep is changing, there's another shift happening quietly that can be far more dangerous if ignored. Your body's ability to regulate temperature. For most of your life, you've relied on your body to tell you when you're too hot or too cold. After 75, that system becomes less reliable. The signals weaken, the response slows, and sometimes the warning doesn't come at all. That means you might not feel thirsty even when your body needs fluids. You might not feel cold even when your body temperature is dropping. You might not recognize overheating until it becomes serious. This is why temperature-related emergencies increase so sharply in older adults. Not because people are careless, but because the body stops communicating as clearly as it once did. So the strategy has to change. Instead of relying on sensation, you rely on structure. Regular hydration, even without thirst. Consistent indoor temperatures. Layered clothing instead of guessing what feels right. And paying closer attention to the environment than ever before. Because at this stage, prevention isn't about reacting. It's about anticipating. Now, let's talk about something that almost nobody connects to aging at first. Digestion. Many people notice they feel heavier after meals, more bloated, more tired. Foods that never caused issues suddenly feel uncomfortable. This isn't random. It's a systemic slowdown. The digestive process becomes less efficient at multiple levels. Swallowing can become less coordinated. Saliva production decreases. Stomach acid levels change. And the body becomes less effective at extracting nutrients from food. So even when someone is eating well, they may not be absorbing what they need. And that leads to a cycle of fatigue, discomfort, and nutritional gaps. The solution here isn't extreme dieting, it's adjustment. Smaller, more frequent meals, slower eating, more thorough chewing, and choosing foods that are easier for the body to process rather than harder to break down. Fermented foods, balanced fiber, and mindful eating habits become more valuable than ever because digestion at this stage is no longer automatic. It becomes something you support actively. And while all of this is happening internally, there's a very visible change that often gets dismissed as just getting older: balance. Falls are one of the most common reasons older adults end up in the hospital. But here's what many people don't realize. Most falls are not accidents. They are the result of multiple systems declining at the same time. Your inner ear, your joint awareness, your vision. Each one contributes to your sense of stability. And when all three weaken together, your ability to react quickly disappears. Not slowly, but suddenly. That moment where you almost caught yourself, that moment gets shorter. Until eventually, it's gone. Which is why balance training becomes essential, not optional. Simple practices done consistently can make a significant difference. Standing on one leg, moving with control, improving awareness of your body in space. These are not complicated exercises, but they are powerful when done regularly, because maintaining balance isn't about strength alone. It's about coordination, awareness, and response time. And underneath everything we've talked about so far, there is one change that quietly accelerates all the others. A process that affects strength, energy, independence, and overall quality of life. After 75, muscle loss begins to speed up in a way most people are not prepared for. Not gradually, but progressively. And this isn't about appearance. This is about function. Muscle is what allows you to stand, walk, lift, recover, and protect yourself from injury. As it declines, everything becomes harder. And what makes this more challenging is that the body becomes less responsive to the very things that used to maintain muscle. Protein, exercise, recovery. They still work, but not in the same way, which means the approach has to change. More intentional nutrition, better timing, more recovery between effort, and a greater focus on consistency over intensity. Because at this stage, losing momentum is easier than ever, but rebuilding it takes more precision than before. And this is where most people begin to realize something important. These changes are not sudden. They're gradual, but cumulative. And once they reach a certain point, they start affecting daily life in ways that are hard to ignore. But what separates those who struggle from those who adapt is not luck, it's awareness. And we're just getting into the deeper layers of how these systems connect with each other. Because what most people don't realize is this: these changes don't happen in isolation. They overlap. They amplify one another. And over time, they create patterns that can either push someone toward rapid decline or allow them to stabilize and maintain independence far longer than expected. Let me explain what that looks like in real life. A patient comes in complaining of fatigue. Not extreme fatigue, just enough to feel off. They say they're sleeping more, but feeling less rested. They're eating normally, but don't feel energized. They've become a little more cautious walking around the house. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming on its own. But when you step back and look at the full picture, you begin to see the connections. Poor sleep reduces recovery. Reduced recovery accelerates muscle loss. Muscle loss affects balance. Balance issues reduce movement. Reduced movement slows digestion. Slower digestion reduces nutrient absorption. Lower nutrient absorption feeds back into fatigue. And now what started as a mild change has become a loop, a self-reinforcing cycle. This is how decline actually happens. Not in one big moment, but through small systems quietly feeding into each other. And this is exactly why awareness matters so much. Because once you can see the pattern, you can interrupt it. Let's go deeper into one of the most underestimated connections: sleep and muscle. Most people think of sleep as rest, but after 75, sleep becomes something else entirely. It becomes your primary recovery window. When deep sleep decreases, your body loses its most efficient repair mechanism. That means even small physical efforts create damage that isn't fully repaired. Now combine that with anabolic resistance, and suddenly the body is breaking down faster than it rebuilds. This is why someone can feel weaker week by week without any obvious cause. They're not doing anything wrong. Their body is simply operating under new rules. So what can be done? You focus on protecting what recovery you still have. Consistent sleep timing becomes more important than total hours. Daytime naps, when used correctly, can actually support recovery rather than disrupt it. And perhaps most importantly, you avoid pushing your body to exhaustion, because exhaustion at this stage doesn't build strength, it delays recovery. Now let's connect digestion to energy. After 75, the body becomes less efficient at extracting nutrients, but your needs don't decrease. In many ways, they increase. This creates a gap. You're taking in food, but getting less out of it, and over time, that gap turns into weakness. This is why meal quality becomes more important than meal quantity. What you eat matters, but how your body handles it matters more. Meals that are too large overwhelm the system. Meals that are too infrequent create energy dips. And foods that are difficult to digest create unnecessary strain. So the strategy becomes, support the system, don't challenge it. Easier to digest proteins, balanced meals, steady intake throughout the day, and enough hydration to keep everything moving, because digestion at this stage is not just about comfort, it's about maintaining energy at a cellular level. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough. Confidence. Not psychological confidence in the traditional sense, but physical confidence, the trust you have in your own body. After 75, that trust often begins to fade, not because people become fearful for no reason, but because their body becomes less predictable. You might feel steady one day, and unsteady the next. You might complete a task easily, and struggle with the same task later. This inconsistency creates hesitation, and hesitation changes how you move. Movements become slower, more rigid, less natural, and ironically, that increases the risk of falling, because good balance depends on fluid, automatic responses, not stiff, overcorrected ones. So part of maintaining stability is rebuilding that trust. Through repetition, through controlled movement, through small daily practices that remind your body how to respond. Because confidence is not just mental, it's physical memory. Now let's bring temperature regulation into this system. When the body struggles to maintain temperature, it uses more energy. That energy has to come from somewhere. And after 75, energy reserves are already lower, so something else gives. Recovery slows, muscle repair weakens, cognitive sharpness can decline temporarily, and all of this can happen without obvious warning signs. This is why even mild dehydration can have a noticeable impact. Not dramatic, but enough to affect how you feel, move, and think. So hydration becomes a constant, not a reaction. You don't wait to feel thirsty. You maintain a steady intake, because by the time thirst appears, you're already behind. Now let's take a step further. Let's talk about the role of inflammation. Low-grade, chronic inflammation is one of the most overlooked drivers of aging after 75. It doesn't feel like an illness. It doesn't show up as something obvious, but it influences everything. Muscle breakdown, joint stiffness, energy levels, recovery speed, even mood. And here's the important part. It compounds other changes. When inflammation is higher, muscle loss accelerates. When muscle loss accelerates, balance worsens. When balance worsens, movement decreases. And when movement decreases, inflammation increases further. Another loop, another cycle. But just like before, once you recognize it, you can begin to influence it. Gentle, consistent movement, balanced nutrition, adequate rest. These are not dramatic interventions, but they are effective when applied consistently. Now let's connect everything together. Sleep, muscle, digestion, balance, temperature, inflammation. These are not separate systems. They are a network. And after 75, that network becomes more sensitive. Small disruptions create larger effects, but the opposite is also true. Small improvements create meaningful stability. This is why the goal at this stage is not perfection. It's consistency, not intensity, but sustainability. Not doing everything at once, but doing the right things repeatedly. And this is where a shift in mindset becomes essential. Earlier in life, progress often comes from pushing harder, doing more, going further. After 75, progress comes from maintaining balance, protecting function, avoiding unnecessary strain, and being deliberate with your choices, because every action now has a greater impact, both positive and negative, and the people who navigate this stage best are not the ones chasing dramatic change. They're the ones paying attention to small signals, adjusting early, responding intelligently, and staying consistent with simple habits that support the body's new reality. Because aging at this level is not about stopping decline completely. That's not realistic. But it is absolutely possible to slow it, to manage it, and in many cases, to maintain independence far longer than expected. And once you begin to understand how these systems interact, you start to see something clearly. You're not losing control. You're being asked to adapt. And adaptation, when done correctly, changes everything. And what most people never get told is this: the body is still capable, still responsive, still adaptable, but it requires a different kind of attention, a different kind of strategy, and a deeper level of awareness than ever before. And this is where things start to become even more interesting.